Hey everyone, I'm Alicia and welcome to a new month on Patreon. I'm super excited to be here today because this is my first guest design for you here on Patreon. I designed this skirt called the Dandridge skirt. And yes, I named it after the beautiful and talented Dorothy Dandridge. When I designed this skirt, I was completely inspired by Dorothy Dandridge in the movie Carmen Jones, where she wore a very pretty draped skirt, red skirt, and an off-the-shoulder black top, and I thought it was so cute. So I wanted to design a skirt and dedicate it to her. So this is the skirt that I came up with. It's a 40s style draped skirt, and let me give you a little tour. Here it has 6 pleats in the front that are stitched from the inside. And then it has optional top stitching. So it's nice and flat on the stomach, and then it gives a nice flow at the bottom of the skirt. It also has an optional drape piece. So it's 2 pieces that are pleated, and then you put it into the side right here. You could wear it on the left side or you could wear it on the right side. It has a 1-inch waistband. And on the back, I kept it nice and clean and with a sleek silhouette. So you have your darts in the back, and then you have a lap zipper closure. So this month's merit badge is zippers. So I'm going to show you how to install a lap zipper. This skirt also comes in a longer length. So it's a floor length also, and there's a cutting line for the knee length, and then you have the long length that has a slit up the back. And what's really good about this is that it goes with the L series bodices. So you can wear it as a gown, you can wear a nice cocktail dress, you could pair it with the Liz, the Lamour, the Landis bodice, and also the Mariner top. So you have tons of options as far as dresses are concerned. So I think that's it about the pattern. Now let's go talk about the pattern and supplies. Okay, so now let's talk about the pattern pieces you will need for this skirt. So we have the skirt front, which is cut on the fold, and please transfer all of your pleat lines indicated right here onto the wrong side of your fabric, because that's very important because we have to sew these pleats together. So mark that onto the wrong side of your fabric. We have the skirt back, which is cut to fabric. Then we have a short drape piece. This is cut 1 fabric, and then we have the long drape piece that is also cut 1 fabric. And then we have the waistband. We cut 1 fabric and 1 interfacing. So it's only 5 pieces, so should be easy to put together. Okay, so here are the supplies that you will need to make your skirt. You need interfacing to fuse to your waistband. You need a 1 1/4 inch fusible interfacing for your zipper closure. It's very important to use a brand new needle in your sewing machine so that you don't snag your fabric. Thread to match your fabric, a 7-inch zipper, and if you don't have a 7-inch zipper, you can just use a long one and then cut it. You need a hook and bar closure, and you need something to transfer the markings onto your fabric. So I recommend tracing wheel and this transfer paper so you can mark in your pleat lines onto the wrong side of your fabric. And also, the fabric that you would need is something that has a very fluid drape. So very liquid fluid drape like a silk charmeuse, a silk crepe, a rayon, a poly crepe. So anything with a nice fluid liquid drape. This one here is what I'm wearing today. This is a poly crepe from Mood, and this is a rayon. And also I'm going to sew this one today. This one's a wool crepe. Let's get started sewing our skirt. So I first prepped the back skirt here. So what I did was I finished the side seams and the center back seam by serging. You can use your overlocker or a zigzag stitch if you don't have a serger. So you want to do that also on the front skirt. So all your vertical seams should be serged. Then I stabilized my center back for the zipper closure right here. And I also sewed my darts in the back. And lastly, I sewed the center back seam from the hem all the way up, and I stopped at the zipper circle mark. So if you're sewing the long skirt, what you would do is you would start sewing from the notch indicated for the slip mark, and then you would sew all the way up and stop at your zipper circle mark. Okay everyone, so let's start working on the skirt front. So make sure that your side seams are serged on your skirt front, and now we're going to start pleating it. So like I said before, we want to make sure that we're looking at the wrong side of our fabric, and we should have transferred all of the lines for your pleats onto the wrong side of your fabric. And as you notice, it's kind of going in a V shape. So the longest pleat here is going to be 4 inches long. Then the next one is a 1/2 inch shorter, which is 3.5 inches. And then the last one, closest to the side seam, is going to be 3 inches long. So first, let's pleat together the short pleat, 3 inches long one. So you just bring the pleat lines together like this. And we're going to pin it just like we pin a dart. So we match those lines. And make sure that the pin goes through both sides like that. And we pin all the way up. And we're going to do that for all of our pleats. So now we're going to work on the 3.5 inch long one. And then you bring the pleat lines together for the 4 inch long stitching line. Make sure it's matching up. And you keep doing that all the way across the skirt front. So I'm going to continue pinning mine, and then we're going to stitch it together at the sewing machine. So I sewed some of my pleats, but let me show you how I did it at the sewing machine, okay? So now that we've pinned the pleats, we're going to start stitching from the waistline. So make sure that your needle lines up right into the line that you made for your pleat. We're going to start by back stitching, and then we're going to stitch directly on the line that we drew on our fabric. And we're going to stop stitching at that little cross mark that we made on our fabric. And we're going to back stitch right there. and trim your threads. So that's how you're going to sew all your pleats down. Just follow your lines, stopping at the cross mark. Okay, so now that we did our pleats, we're going to turn it to the wrong side, and we're going to press the excess of the pleats towards the center front, and we're going to pin that in place. So just finger press the excess of your pleats to the center front and pin it at the waistline. And then we're going to baste this in place using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you use the longest length on your stitch length on your machine. Mine is 5 millimeters. Okay, so now your pleats are already looking beautiful. So you can leave it just like this if you like, or you have the option to top stitch each pleat down as well, just for a little extra. So I'm going to show you how to top stitch. We're basically going to top stitch from, the waistline all the way down to and stopping at the pleat opening. So we're going to do that on each pleat. So change your stitch length back to 2.5 millimeter for your top stitching. And we could do our top stitching 1/8 of an inch from the fold. I'm using a contrasting fabric so you can see my stitching here. And you stop top stitching right when you see the fabric opening for your pleat and back stitch. Now that our pleats have been top stitched and looking lovely, we can assemble the skirt together. So we take the skirt front and the skirt back, and we're going to sew them at the side seams. So let's pin our side seams together. And you're going to match your notch at your side seam. So let's match the notches first and pin them. And we're going to stitch your side seams using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So continue stitching your other side seam the same way, and then we can start doing our drape. Okay, so now that we sewed our side seams together and we pressed the seam allowances open, we're going to move on to the drape. So we're going to put the skirt aside. So I'm going to start with the short drape. So it's this rectangle piece. And we're going to fold it right sides together, matching the little clips. Now, I transferred my pleats by just making clips on the top here and the bottom. So you're going to have these little pleat lines here at the top and the bottom, and you just make little clips. And you can also transfer your arrow, like I transferred an arrow on the wrong side of my fabric, so I know that I'm going to be pleating going towards the left-hand side. So you just match it up and pin along both edges here, because that's where we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So let's go to the machine and sew both sides using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Back stitch first. And sew all the way down to the edge, to the fold of your fabric. Stitch all the way to the fold, and then back stitch. Trim your threads and sew your other side. Now we're going to trim the fabric on the edge. Trim your seam allowance down. And then we just trim off the corners as well. And now we're going to turn this right side out. Poking out your corners. And now we're going to press, rolling the edge of your seam out like that. So we can press that flat. So roll the edge of your fabric and then press. Do that on both sides. So roll that seam and then press. Okay, now that we turned it right side out and pressed it, we're going to do the same thing for the long drape. So now that we stitched our short drape and our long drape, we're going to assemble them together. So we're going to baste them together and then we're going to pleat them together. So you want to put your short drape on top of your long drape and you want to match those little clip marks that you made. So make sure that they all match. And we're going to pin them right at the top, matching those edges. And then using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and the longest stitch length on your machine, you're going to baste it together. So now that we basted it together, now it's time to pleat our drape. So you want to follow your pattern so that you can pleat it in the right direction. So just make sure that it matches up to your pattern. Just refer to it so that you don't get confused about the pleating, and follow those pleat lines. So you're going to have 6 pleats. So what you do is you take the pleat right here, this notch, so that's the second notch to the right, and you're going to match it to the previous notch. So you're going to fold it just like that, and you pin that in place, and that's your first pleat. And you're going to keep doing that. So this little notch that you made, a clip, we're going to match it to this clip here. And that's your second pleat. And you're going to keep doing that all the way across. So from here to here. That's your third pleat. From this notch to this notch. I keep saying notch, but clip, same difference. That's 4. And then from this clip to this clip is 5. And then this one to this one makes 6. So you should have 6 pleats here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we're going to baste this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This is a little thick, so take your time. So now that we constructed our beautiful drape, we're going to attach it to the waistline of our skirt. So you could put it on either side of the skirt. I like to put it on the left side. And there's going to be markings on your pattern that indicate where to put the drape. So it should be right after this last pleat, ending at your side seam. So you pin that in place at the waist, matching your edges. Make sure the seam allowance underneath is open. And make sure that the drape is on the right side. So the smaller drape is on top and then the long drape is underneath. So once that's pinned in place, we're going to stitch it using the longest length stitch on our machine. I'm going to baste that to the waistline. using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So, see how beautiful your skirt is coming together. So now let's move on to inserting our zipper. Okay everyone, so let's put in our lap zipper. So looking from the right side of your fabric, we have the underlap side, which is on the right, and then we have the overlap side, which is on the left. So the underlap side, we're going to press that under a 1/2 inch. Let that warm up a bit. You use a ruler to measure out your 1/2 inch and then press. And now the overlap side, on the left side, we're going to press that under 5/8 of an inch. So now that we've pressed our seam allowances in, we're going to take our zipper, open it up, the right side of the zipper facing up. We're going to do the underlap side first. We're going to place the fabric just to the right of the zipper teeth, making sure that that little metal stop is 5/8 of an inch below the raw edge of your waistline. So you could measure that to make sure that your little metal stop is 5/8 of an inch below the raw edge of your fabric on the waistline. And then we're going to pin that in place. Thankfully, we don't have to do a really long zipper because it's only 7 inches long. So we can do this. So now we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to stitch about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch right here away from the fold of your fabric. Make sure you're using your 2.5 millimeter stitch length. And we're gonna back stitch. Be careful not to stitch on that metal stop. I would say about a 1/16 of an inch away from the fold, you should be stitching. And then back stitch once you get to the end. And break your thread. So now that you completed your underlap side, we're going to sew the zipper to the overlap side. So close your zipper up. And place your fabric just covering the previous stitching that you just made. So just like that. And then you're going to pin that in place. So you're going to pin to the left of your fold through the fabric and through the zipper, like that. So that fold should be covering your stitching like that, and then you stick your pin right to the left of the zipper teeth. And you will know that you did it correctly because you should be able to open your zipper all the way down, like that. So if you can't open your zipper, then you may have pinned it incorrectly, so you want to double check to make sure that you can open your zipper, okay? So now we're going to stitch this down 3/8 of an inch from the fold of your fabric. So you zip down, open your zipper, and using your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I gotta move my needle to the right. There we go. Double check that your metal stop is out the way because we don't want to break a needle. That's never fun. So start by back stitching. If you're a little nervous, you can always use your hand wheel just to make sure that you pass that little zipper stop and that you don't stitch over it and break your needle. So that's what I'm going to do to be on the safe side. Okay, so now I'm past it. So continue stitching. As far as you can. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. So what you're gonna do is with your needle down, you're gonna lift your presser foot, zip up your zipper, close your zipper, and then put your presser foot back down. And now we're gonna stitch blindly. So we're gonna stitch down, trying to keep that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is always a little scary part. But try to keep it nice and straight at the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, even though you can't see it anymore. Just take your time. And now we're going to leave our needle down, pick up a presser foot up, and we're going to pivot to stitch across the bottom of our zipper. We're going to stitch a little L to finish it off. And back stitch. Trim your threads. And you have now completed your lap zipper. So now that we've finished doing our lap zipper, it's time to attach our waistband to our skirt. So let's do that. So put your skirt to the side. And this is your waistband piece. Make sure that you used your interfacing and fused it to the wrong side of your waistband. And we're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, and just press it to crease it. And now we're going to fold this right sides together. And we're going to pin it on both sides. Now one side is the underlap side, and that's the side with the little notch here on the end. So we pin right at that notch. And then we pin this little short edge here. And then this side here is the overlap side. So we just pin the short end here, right sides together. And we're going to stitch from the notch across and then down that short end. And we're going to stitch also down this short. Put your regular foot, straight stitch foot, back on your machine. I still had my zipper foot on. And using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to start stitching with that little notches. Back stitch. Your needle down, lift your presser foot up, pivot your work, and then put your presser foot back down, and then stitch across that short edge. And back stitch. And break your threads, and stitch the other side, the other short end. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to trim those edges down. So trim that seam allowance. And also clip right at that corner so we can get a nice short, sharp corner there. In your underlap side, where that notch is, you want to clip right up to the stitching, but not through the stitching. So you clip like that, and then you go ahead and trim the seam allowance down. And then you trim your corners as well, because we don't want any bulk in our corners. So just trim close to your corners. Just make sure you don't trim too close where you go through your stitching. And then we're going to turn this right side out. I'm using my nail here, but you can use a point turner or any type of turning tool that you prefer. And just press that down. And if you can see, you'll have this 1 inch extension, and that is going to go on your underlap side of your skirt. So let's attach this to our skirt now. So now that you have your skirt, we're looking at the center back of your skirt. So we're going to open up our zipper, our beautiful lap zipper that we installed. And hope you're proud of yourself because you're going to receive your merit badge this month for zippers. And we're going to take this extension, this 1-inch extension. You're going to open it up like this. And you're going to have that 1-inch extension, and that's going to be placed right on the right-hand side, matching your edges. So it's going to extend past your zipper like that. And you open it up and match your edges right here. And pin it in place. Now there's going to be a notch here that's going to match up to your side seam. So make sure your side seam allowance is open. And then you pin that notch to the side seam at the waistline. And then you just continue pinning all the way around the waistline of your skirt. There's going to be another notch on this side that's going to match up to your other side seam. In the overlap side, you're going to see that the waistband is flush with the zipper, so there's no extension on this side. There's only an extension on the underlap side. Center not matching. Something. Hold on. Okay, now that we have the waistband all pinned in place, we're going to sew this at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. want to use your hand wheel at the end to make sure you're not stitching over the zipper metal stop. And then back stitch. So now that we sewed our waistband on, we're going to trim and grade. So we're going to grade our seam allowances so that the waistband is the narrowest and the skirt is the widest. And if you have the drape in there, that's going to be in between the two. So we're going to grade this down. So I'm going to start on the waistband side, since that one is going to be the narrowest one. And now we're going to, if you have the drape in here, we're going to trim that down so that it's slightly higher than the waistband seam allowance that we just trimmed. So just a little bit higher. Get rid of some of that bulk. And now we're going to trim the actual skirt down a little bit higher than the waistband, if you only have the waistband, or you can do it a little bit higher than the drape. Now we're going to press up that seam allowance into the waistband. Oops, I sprayed. So just continue to press that seam allowance into the waistband. And now we're going to turn under the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on the waistband and place it over, covering the stitching on the inside of your skirt. And we're going to pin that in place. Now you have the option to hand stitch this down on the inside of your skirt. But I'm lazy to hand stitch, so I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin from the outside to hold it in place. So just make sure that fold is covering your previous stitching here. And then pin from the outside like that. And do that all the way across your skirt. All right, so I have everything pinned in place, so now I'm going to stitch this in the ditch. From the right side of your fabric, you're going to place your needle right in that crease. And kind of pull your fabric a little open like that. And stitch, catching the seam allowance underneath. Okay, so now you have your waistband on. So now let's talk finishing. So for your hem, I want you to serge the bottom edge of your hem, press it up 5/8 of an inch, and then top stitch at 1/2 an inch. And the last thing you would have to do is attach your hook and bar closure. So the bar will go on the underlap side, which is the right side, and you'll hand stitch that on, and then the hook will go on the left side like that, and you'll hand stitch that on, and then you're all done. So everyone, she's all done, and thank you so much for joining me on my first Patreon design. I'm super excited to see everyone in this skirt, so please make sure that you tag us in your makes on social media, hashtag Dandridge skirt, and also tag Gertie and me and Nati so we can see it right away. And I'm so proud of you that you earned all your merit badges this year. And we want to thank you so much also for being patrons, because without you, we wouldn't be able to do this. So we're super happy that you're with us, and we can't wait to see you next year. Take care.